Good evening. Today is September 9, 2009. It is 5:36 p.m. This is a regular board meeting of the Brownsville Navigation District. I hereby call this meeting to order. Reverend, would you lead us in a prayer?
Jesus, we thank you that you taught us to pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Father, we begin this evening by hallowing your name, by honoring your name, by recognizing that we are stewards of every good and perfect thing that you've given us. We thank you for the Port of Brownsville. I thank you for these commissioners. I thank you for the administration and all who work here. Father, I pray that you would watch over them and bless them, bless their deliberations tonight, the discussions, the things that are up for review and discussion. Father, may you give us insight and wisdom to plan and prepare for the future, that your blessing and your favor and your prosperity may be upon this place and this city in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Texas flag.
I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, item number 2, public audience. Do we have any public audience comments? None. Okay, we're going to go ahead and skip to item number 7. Consideration and action on audit of district's financial statements for fiscal year ending December 31, 2008.
Carlos did want to stay the whole time.
You want to make any intros, opening comments?
We have Carlos Ferreira with the Long Chilton LLP here. He's our external auditor. He does have our audit proofs ready for your review, and I think he has some things to make for you.
A few comments.
Thank you, sir.
Is this the revised of the revised?
This is revised. As of like 10 minutes ago.
I know.
That's good.
But I think we've got it all.
What changed?
Nope.
Thank you.
What changed, I'm leaving some on here. What changed was there was a grant, reimbursement grant from the federal government that was, that you all expended the monies, but you hadn't asked for them, you hadn't applied for the reimbursement yet. But technically, so we have it right now as due from other agencies. And so we put that in, which increases your statement of net assets and also increases your operation for the year. So we went ahead and make sure that was in. I didn't want to put it in as a proper adjustment at the end of this year. It really have it clean as we could get it, and that's what we did. So, and rather than go through all this, we met with audit committee at nauseum with respect to this, and my throat is also going, so if I shook hands with you, I hope I don't have swine flu. I don't think I do. I just have a sinus infection. He'll be gone by tomorrow.
Security.
I will tell you, now they're all sitting looking for the hand sanitizer. Real briefly, we issued an unqualified opinion. For those who were not on the audit committee, we issued an unqualified opinion, a clean report, which is found on page 7. And again, that's a clean report you've had, I guess, for the last 2 years. Before that, you had a qualified opinion. But after last year, impairment that we got rid of and stuff, we brought it back down to a clean opinion, and brought it up to a clean opinion. So I just really, instead of going page by page by page by page, let me just give you the real quick analysis of everything. If you just look at beginning, I think on page 10 is the management discussion analysis. The management discussion analysis, what we call the MD&A, is the management, what Debbie produces in layman's terms for everybody to read without having to go through, if you're not an accountant, having to go through all the financial statements to try to discern what is in them. So this gives you a real brief narrative with respect to what has transpired during the year. And so very quickly, if you just look at page 13, this is your changes in net assets. You'll see that your total assets at the end of the year, and again, we have a short year. This is a 12/31 year, and so it's a 10-month cycle. Hopefully it'll be the last 10-month cycle you'll have. It did pose some problems. Total assets were $144,999,000. And you'll see your total liabilities for the end of the year was $57,985,000. That's that first column. That leaves you, in effect, your total net assets, or in effect your fund balances, of about $87 million, of which $8.5 million is the unreserved, or the unrestricted fund balance, and that's what you have currently. Now, if you looked at 3.1, the column next to it, you'll see that that number last year at March 1st, which was your old fiscal year end, was $10.1 million. But let me tell you exactly what happened and why it went down. One of the problems that we ended up having with respect to the audit this year and how this was supposed to be disclosed and how it was supposed to be reported was the fact that your revenues, your tax revenues, generally were recorded as being recognized when you, in effect, levied on them, which would have been October 1. So at March 1st, you've already recognized all those revenues. Well, it didn't make sense that from March 1 all the way till December 31st, you had, in effect, zero revenue. So what we did in conference with so many people that I tend to forget who they all were, but members of GFOA, people that we had classes with, that we go to CPE with, other partners in the firm, and whatnot, we decided that the best route would be to make a prior period adjustment to the end of March 1 of last year to unrecognize those tax revenues, 10/12 of them, so that in effect they would be recognized in the current period. Because technically on October 1st of this year, what will happen is that you have or at last year, October 1st of last year, when those things were levied, you don't get to recognize the whole year. You only get to recognize 2/12 of them. So in effect, we have an adjustment to bring back 10/12. That'll happen again this year, and it's a recurring adjustment now. So as we get to the end of this cycle, it'll all even out. But that was the reason why you see a drop. It really wasn't a drop per se. You just have an odd fiscal year end. But now you have it'll be fine. In the page 14 is the changes in net assets continue. You have to see your operating revenues. Again, you have a 10-month period, $11 million. 12-month period last year was $12.6 million. So that was the reason why you have a $1.5 million drop. But again, it's a 10/12 versus 12/12. Operating expenses were $8.9 million, and you had an operating income of $2,097,000 for the 10-month period. You also had non-operating revenues of about $2 million, so that brought your income before capital contributions of about $4.1 million. The capital contributions is the adjustment we were talking about, that why this came in right now. This is $360,000 that, in effect, is a grant that you are applying for. It's monies that are transfers in, or they're due from other federal agencies. They're being recognized technically as income in the current period. So in effect, overall, you had a $4.5 million increase. You started with net assets of 84, which you saw in the beginning, first page. There's the prior period adjustment of $2.4 million, and then you end up with $87 million in assets at the end. Your capital assets and debt administration, you can see all those. Those really did not change very much. There were about $3 million worth of increase, and I think that was mainly in the construction process account. All the rest of the bullet items in here that Debbie puts in are pretty interesting issues, because it basically tells the story of what happened during the whole year and the more important areas that happened throughout the whole year. Also, on page 16, if you look on the outstanding question, everybody wants to know how much do you owe, you'll see that at the end of the year, your total debt was $37,503,000, and you can see it broken down there between revenue bonds and general obligation bonds and whatnot, notes payable, capital leases. The rest of the report is the breakdown of all of this, which I don't think I need or you want me to go through at this point in time. So, in addition to that, we also issued a report on internal control with respect to compliance with matters because this is a governmental audit, and we had nothing to report on that. You will also have received this. I didn't bring extra copies. I think I gave them to the audit committee. We did have a management comment or two. There were things that we wanted to make sure that you all took care of in the current cycle this year. One was a control deficiency that we felt needed to be addressed, and the other one was just another comment that we felt we needed to follow up on. which I don't think I need to go on in here unless you really want me to get into detail. There was some discussion with respect, and I think you may have it on your agenda, with respect to when the audit should be delivered. In our process of going through this thing, we determined that you probably need to have this, if you comply with TCEQ, not within the 5-month cycle that you all were talking about in the or the 5-month period, but probably within the 4-month period, which means at the end of this year, December 31st, this report should be in your hands, delivered by April 30th, which puts pressure on everybody to make sure it happens. There are a couple of areas that need to be resolved. We talked about an audit committee. One was the liability that we have out there that was still unresolved, that still need to be cleared out with the railroad relocation. And I presume that there will still be some discussion with respect to further impairment adjustments with respect to what you have in construction and process with the bridge. But those things being said, that gives us a good time frame, gives the staff a good time frame that they must, in effect, have financials in your hands, in our hands, in effect, for audit, probably within about 60 to 65 days, 75 days, so we can complete our audit and deliver everything to you before the end of April. And that should be the norm subsequently, or from this point on. So if you have any other questions on the audit, I'd be more than glad to try to answer them.
Gentlemen?
No?
Couple of things. Well, go ahead. Not just.
I just had a question, Mr. Auditor, on this report. Did you have any findings that, or suggestions that we might look at to rectify, if any?
In regards to just the two that I mentioned.
Just those two?
Yeah. One is the liability issue that we're carrying on the books, the reconciliation effect of that railroad relocation that started years ago. And the other one was, I believe, the issue on the impairment. That still is an asset that you have on your books, but it needs to be, in effect, scrutinized even more as time goes on. Those are the two major ones.
Okay. And then finally, in terms of either last year or the year before, how do the numbers look in comparison? Do we look fiscally sound, or as opposed to the previous year?
There's not a whole big difference. I mean, obviously, when you have a fiscal year change like this, and it's really kind of an odd one, you try to get financial statements that are somewhat comparative that you can look at and determine whether am I looking at this thing right, or does it make sense. The port is in a very strong financial shape. I mean, there's no question. You have large reserves. You have good cash flow. You can see your operations are doing well. Now, I don't know what the economy has done this year, as it has affected everything in sight. But that being said, I think if you just look at those two snapshots, that you guys have, you're in good shape. You're making your debt requirements, everything else.
Yep. I guess just from that perspective, what we worry about is how do we do on operating versus revenues, and you can see even in 10 months we still picked up in excess of $2 million to the bottom line, and that's really, you can call it profit if you will. There was a couple of things that were discussed in the audit committee I just kind of want to mention. Well, one is in respect to how to address the issue of the having the audit completed on the 30th. So if you're saying that compliance-wise that we have to comply with TCQ, then we're bound to have that done by the 30th of April and have it in, okay? Because one of the things that we discussed was whether or not that needed to be formed into a policy, or could it be addressed in the engagement, for example, that says, we understand what our obligation, here's your obligation, and we all know that by the 30th of September the audit will be complete. The other discussion that we had is whether or not we should seek to...
Didn't you say that we would have that we did April, we'd have it by 30th of September? Would take
April.
April the 30th.
No, what we had discussed at the audit committee is we're getting this audit very late for a lot of different reasons. And we felt like if we were going to manage the port properly as commissioners, we need to have this audit in a lot sooner. And we had discussed May 30th. Well, now Carlos is coming to us and saying it's going to have to be sooner than that to comply with TCQ. So anyway.
And the only other comment we talked about was whether or not we should make an effort to seek putting together a CAFR, a Comprehensive Financial Report, for submission to GFOA for recognition of accounting achievement. And that's really a staff decision. I know that Debbie was not at the meeting, and Christina was, and we had that discussion. And I really think that if we choose to do that, it's probably more likely that you're looking at the audit report of 2011 as opposed to 2010. That's certainly that's something that we will look at and discuss. It just entails a lot more work, a lot more reporting. It's a valuable document. It can help you in the future if you seek to go out for bonds, or even if you seek to refinance, it could help you. It's just another distinction of sound professional accounting practices. And so that's something that we're going to take a look at very hard, but I think we kind of kicked it around, at least very preliminarily, after the audit committee, and really without Debbie's input, but more likely looking at 2011 as opposed to 2010. And I only make that comment because I'm sure you will hear about that as we get into discussion where we go with our audit for the coming year. So that was pretty much what we covered at the audit committee meeting.
I think for those of you that don't know what a CAFR is, it's Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. The college got theirs about 2 years ago, I think the first time, or last year, 2 years ago. City has had theirs for
30 years.
Okay, 28 years. Yeah. They're one of the longest running in the state. Cameron County has theirs. PUB got theirs about 3 years ago for the first time. And it's the highest level of reporting responsibility for governments. And from that standpoint, it just says to everybody out there, we are conforming to the highest standard. What you see in us is no different than what you will see anywhere else. And they really, the report, this report is not very big, but the report will get a little bit larger. There's a lot of statistical data that is in the report that, from the standpoint of just really good information, 10-year information, is excellent. From any standpoint, bondholders or people who are reviewing the bonds, underwriters, et cetera, that would want. And really just tweaking it a little bit and adding a few more items. I think you could do it, much to the dismay of Debbie, because she's probably going, not now, not now. Because it is a lot of work that you have to do. You do have to get a lot more work. But the people that review this, you do have to submit it within 180 days of the close of the year. But what is important is that the people that review this really review it. From the standpoint of every footnote disclosure, if they don't tie to the general ledger, items, page numbers, where you put the comma, everything. That's how bad it is. But when you get that certificate, it's nice, and it's a good deal. It's very good for all of them.
Like an Emmy,
I think it's a great thing to be achieved, for us to want to achieve, because the more accountability we have, the more trust the public has in us.
Absolutely.
And that's something we have to have, is the public trust to be able to operate. Because we're owned by the public. We are a public entity.
Any other comments, questions?
No, sir.
Okay.
Action item.
Do we have a motion to approve the financial statement?
Second.
We got a motion by Commissioner Arambula, seconded by Commissioner Reed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries. Go back to item number 3, receive Port Director's report. Mr. Campirano.
Two brief reports. One is just to give you an update on the cruise line study efforts. I will tell you that the group committee met for the first time, or the working group met for the first time, and as a result of that meeting decided to entertain a telephone interview of consultants that had submitted a proposal to do the feasibility study. That conference call was had. All of the participating entities participated in that. And as a result of that, there was a vote to go ahead and ask the consultants' maritime directors, which is Chuck Towsley, as well as in association with Market Scope Inc., Jay Lewis, to submit a contract. The contract has been submitted. Mr. Renfro has reviewed it. It is, I understand, it is in the mail with all of the changes, and they've signed it and executed. The thing for us going forward will be that to execute that contract and move on, They did tell me that they're looking at possibly the first week in October to do the site visit and kick this thing off. So Mr. Cowan or Commissioner Cowan, you may want to add to that, but we're moving along with that effort. So, no.
I'm just real happy that we finally got it put together and that we're moving forward, and to have a regional collaboration working is really a heartwarming thing to see happen. And that's what it's going to take for this project and for a lot of other projects. So I think we're setting the tone in a way for many other things to happen in the future regionally. So I want to thank you all for your support and your belief in the project and in me and my leadership abilities to put this together. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, for leading or heading that project. So.
What cities have contributed?
So we have South Padre Island, Port Isabel, Harlingen, Cameron County, ourselves, and the city of Brownsville has got it on their agenda, and they should have it forthcoming here soon.
That's good.
Yeah, we have $46,500 in hand commitments to date. $500 came from
from the
Rio
Valley
Grande
Partnership, unsolicited.
Yeah.
The Valley Partnership, which is the Valley Chamber of Commerce, unsolicited, sent us a check for $500 and a note that they wanted to support the effort. So it's reaching, the news and the idea has got momentum all the way up the valley, and as this thing moves forward, we'll need to include more of the region up into Hidalgo County into the effort, because we need, and Monterrey and Matamoros and everybody that will be part of.
Right. Probably Mercedes would be a good one to include. Matamoros.
Yes, of course. Everybody, all up and down, like I said, up and down before we get along too further, though, one of the things that I'd like, we haven't mentioned, but we have a new pastor of our Siemens Center and has taken over as the kind of the ports pastor, and that is Andreas Lewis, Pastor Andreas Lewis, and I wanted to welcome him and thank him for agreeing to come and say the prayer at the meetings and being the ports pastor. We appreciate that.
In closing on the cruise line, the only thing is that the study effort should not exceed $30,000 and probably will be completed within a 90-day time frame, so it's not going to drag on. The other, unless there's any questions, my other just pertain to the mitigation land bank or the mitigation bank update. I just want to let you all know that the prospectus is complete. It's final. If you all want a copy, be happy to provide you one. You got a copy of the draft. This is the final with a few changes. Request to the Corps of Engineers was presented asking them to go ahead and set the 30-day public notice, and what that notice would do is advise all of the federal agencies, the interagency, the IRT members, and anybody who's interested that there is a proposal to do this. They would make the prospectus available for anyone that wanted and provide for a 30-day comment period. The Corps would obviously also comment on it. Once all that is done, and that could be anywhere between 30 to 60 days, probably closer to 60, HDR would still have to receive all those comments, categorize them for us, prepare a report that would essentially make recommendations about how to go forward. I expect that we would have at least this phase of the project closed probably within 90 to 120 days, but at least the formal process with the written agency comments will begin once the Corps issues that public notice. And so that project, at this point, we probably won't hear any more about it for another 3 months or so. So just want to let you know where we were with that. And other than that, that kind of concludes my Port Director's report.
Mr. Chairman, could I say something real quick?
Yes.
I omitted a very important factor, and I did not thank our staff, because without our staff's help, I could have never put this regional effort together. Eddie and Donna and Vicki and everybody helped me do this, and without their help, we would not be in this position, and I want to thank them for that.
Very good. All right, let's move on to item number 4, consideration and action on the following consent agenda items. A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of August 19, 2009. B, approval to authorize payments over $25,000. One is HDR, doc number 10, weight limit calculations, $2,348.63. Oil dock 2 and 3 evaluation, $28,741.50. There's an amount of $18,419.50. Dock number 3 evaluation, $16,561.25. There's an amount of $7,067.14. Evaluation of the spoils disposal options, $5,533.50. Cargo dock 16, $396,733.80. Oil dock number 6, $170,675.95. Tiger grant is $20,519.32, and the mitigation bank is $13,443.95. Item C, approval of the following leases. One is Alamo Concrete Products Limited new lease. Item 2, Roll and Hold Warehousing and Distribution Corp. Release. Item 3, Schaefer Stevedoring Company is a new lease. 4 is South Texas Railroad Construction Company new lease. 5, Raul Garcia DBA Garcia Shrimping new lease. C is Bayou Marine Service Inc. release.
Mr. Chairman, request to table item 4C1.
4C1. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask for a clarification here on HDR, the vendor being on dock 3 evaluation is a figure of $16,561.25, and then there's no line item description for the $7,067.14. Is that 2 separate evaluations?
No, it's 2 separate invoices. In other words, invoice 1651 is one invoice, and then
Okay.
7067 is the other one. Didn't make it for payment, or there was a question on it, and it didn't get submitted for payment. So it just means that it's 2 invoices for the same task.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
Same thing you will see with evaluations of dock 2 and 3, oil dock 2 and 3.
So we paid, assuming these get approved, about 50% of the total of what we're going to be paying.
Well, on some of these, you may, depending on which task, you close to either completion.
No, I
or the
understand that, but I'm
50%.
looking at the bill to date versus the unbilled balance.
Yeah, and then.
So we're about halfway through this.
Yeah, now the big decision, and one of the ones that we'll talk about later, is going to be cargo dock 16 and oil dock 6.
Okay. We're going to talk about it later in what respect?
In this presentation, about where we are with it, and what impact what it'll have on the project schedule and what have you.
All right. With the exception of item 4C1, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we got a motion by Commissioner Reed, seconded by Commissioner Cowan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries. Item number 5, presentation on the Port of Brownsville Tiger Grant application.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we wanted to do a presentation on where we were with the Tiger Grant, because we're basically down at the, I guess, at the 59th minute. we're completing the application process. It has to be submitted by next week, the 15th of September. We don't want to wait till that date. So we thought this would be an opportunity to do two things. One is to kind of give you how this thing is shaping up, the program elements of the application, and then essentially really about where we are on the design, conceptual, and the final design stages of 16 and 6. And if we keep to the schedule, we move forward with it and tie that schedule. If we choose for some reason, if you recall, when you approved those two applications, even though you approved the total amount, we said that we would come back at a different phase and make a determination, or whether we wanted to not go on to the final design or go ahead and proceed to final design. So we're there now. With that, Jeff Massengale and Mike Krieber with HDR are here, and we'll go ahead and go through the presentation about the Tiger Grant.
Are we going to do an overhead?
Yes.
Okay.
There's some chairs here. Oh, let me move the chairs.
Thank you, Eddie, and Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Most of you all probably remember me from earlier in the summer, and I'm serving in a principal in charge role for all of the projects that HDR is doing for the Port of Brownsville right now. I'd like to introduce Mike Krieber. He's our project manager, working on the design and permitting efforts associated with Oil Dock 6 and Cargo Dock 16. What I thought we would do is, as you recall, we came to you all at the first part of the summer with specific task orders, one for the design of Oil Dock 6, one for the design of Cargo Dock 16. It was very descriptive in what all was going to be involved there. Both of these projects progressed we're on schedule, and we progressed in a typical engineering design mode where you approach something in phases. Generally, both projects follow a conceptual design phase, which is completed. That rolls into the preliminary design phase, which is completed. And now we're at a juncture, we'll talk about this a little bit more, of moving into the final design phase. So far things have progressed very well. We had a kickoff meeting, I guess, here at the port for both projects. Different sorts of attendees were represented here. We had very good dialogue with, on Dock 16, we had most of the stevedoring companies, several of the port staff, line handlers, harbor pilots. Tried to bring everyone into the project that would potentially interface with it or use the facility, and get their input early on in the design process. Same thing for Oil Dock 6. We brought in existing tenants of Oil Docks 1, 2, 3, and 5, and also invited the Harbor Master, Harbor Pilots Association, and line handlers to really talk about what we're trying to accomplish with the project and get their input. So really what we're trying to do with this project is you have Oil Dock 5 and Cargo Dock 15 predominantly handles 75% of your cargo. Recognizing the age of the other facilities built in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, we're in somewhat of a deteriorated state. Really need to look at taking the port to the next level with additional infrastructure investment. So we wanted to. I think everyone is on the same page going into the project as to what we wanted to try to accomplish there. Well, that's not it. But you don't want me talking about that.
Roads.
This is kind of a spatial relationship. you know, looking north is straight up in this slide. You can see existing dock 15 is here. It has a 600-foot structural length, and the overall berth is 900 feet. Existing oil dock 3 is here, and it serves for barge and ship traffic. The two projects we're talking about was, let's come in and add, look at adding dock 16 here, which right here starts at the easternmost limit, and we'll get into this in the next slide, but you'll see two different colors in this 900-foot area. And one is for the base bid section, one is for an additive bid item section. So it's nominally 600 foot in the base bid area and 300 feet in the additive bid item. Across the channel, we're looking at adding, in concept, is originally thought, let's take oil dock 5, which is located over here, and let's just replicate that in this area and go forward. There's actually been quite a few changes to that way of thinking, and we can go into details on that. I think all of it's good. Some of it had to do with users' input, some of it had to do with the water depths and channel bank topography in the area, and how the channel dredging relates to berthing limits and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about what we've accomplished to date in the conceptual and preliminary design phases. All of the land-based topographic surveying is completed, as well as the hydrographic and dive surveys that were done at the sites. Hydrographic surveys are soundings below the water to define the submerged mudline profiles. Dive surveys were done to try to identify any sorts of debris that was emerging above the mud line, so you can indicate that those on the construction drawings to prevent surprises during construction to the extent you can. All the geotechnical investigations were completed both in the land and in the water. We have submitted both Corps of Engineers Section 10 and 404 permit applications for both dock facilities. They went in about relatively close to each other in terms of submission. Our permitting group and Mike have done everything possible to continue to have dialogue with the Corps of Engineers and the regulatory agencies associated with offering input during the public comment period. Both permits are out for public comment right now. The comment period closes, I believe, on Oil Dock 6 at the end of September, and at the October the 1st for Dock 16. Well, preliminary input has been good so far. We don't have a lot of objections to deal with, and permitting may be on a little bit faster pace than what I had indicated to you all back at the first part of the summer. So I'll get into how that relates to the schedule, or actually Mike's going to touch on that later in the presentation. We also got into the part of our scope was to evaluate where we're going to put the dredge material out of the berths for Dock 16 and Dock 6. So we evaluated dredge material placement area 7. We found that essentially it doesn't have a lot of capacity, and through our the task order related to the federal channel deepening, Neil McClellan has looked at, has developed a concept for increasing DMPA 8. It'll give us enough capacity for both of these projects and then some. So you'll be seeing a proposal from us to develop those designs in the next few weeks, I guess. That'll come under the channel deepening project. A lot of the work that we have done in the concept and preliminary design stages goes into what we call a design basis document. And really what this is a comprehensive manual that describes what information have we gathered, what's been assumed, what are the design codes we're using, what's the design methodology, important points relative to the project, and things like that. So these are some of the things I won't tell you all with too much detail, but we went into a fair amount of looking into things like construction materials, what's available, what's available on the market right now, what's beneficial in terms of material selection. Trying to determine how much scour is going to be or should be expected based on a certain vessel and wheel wash activity and things like that, and try to design around these sorts of things. We have spent some time on the cargo backland requirements, but as you'll see in the later part of the presentation, there's been some discussion, especially on Dock 16, relative to potential rail, and all of that ties into the Tiger Grant application. So the backland design has developed quite a bit further on Old Dock 6 than it has on Dock 16. We're really waiting. We wanted to finalize what we were trying to do on the rail side before we set grades and things like that. We also looked at electric load requirements. There's some things involved in one of the line items in the Tiger Grant relative to a new crane, and we looked at that as well. Again, this last part is something really probably should be located at the very top, because what we found is it's important to get everyone's input, staff and all the users, so we all depart with the same common goal. And so I think we've done a good job at that. I'm pretty encouraged about how those discussions and subsequent meetings went with those people. We've had Eddie and Adiel up to our office in Corpus Christi. They met with their entire design and permitting team and got into a lot more detail than what I'm presenting today. And they were part of the decision-making process with some things that we needed to decide collectively on in the design process. So, as I mentioned, we're finished with concept and preliminary design. We have our design basis, the design drawings, permit applications. All of that will be submitted in draft form to Adiel, and those are here today. And we've also developed opinions of probable project costs to go with that, and some of that will tie into the. I'm going to let Mike. I know you guys are wanting to know what's the price tag, so I'm saving that for last. As we go forward here.
What's the DMPA?
Dredge material placement area. Disposal area. It's had several names. That's the proper protocol to use now. It's DMPA. Or dredge material management area. You'll also hear it referred to as that. So I think this is disposal area 7, right? 8 is back. This is 8. Oh yeah, it's 7. 7's here. Okay. This is a aerial of Dock 6. This is Dock 15 and Dock 16. This will be the location. This is Oil Dock 3, and Oil Dock 6 will be located here. Here's a picture of just in cartoon form here. This is the Dock 16 project layout area. This is Dock 15 that currently exists. So we're looking down from the air on this now. This is the base bid that I talked about. This is nominally about 600 feet. And so this is this will be Dock 16. And this is what we call the infill section. It's about 300 foot that would bridge the gap between this structure and this structure. This is of a different design and cross section than this is. The red part, which is the base bid, is similar to Dock 15, but several things created the need for different structural elements in this structure. So we couldn't just cut and paste what we did for 15 over here. Soils are different, loading's different, or loading's the same, but the dredge depth and design vessel is different. So essentially, extending the road, we have a cargo or laydown area, or also called a patio area here, and there's some site utilities and things like that we won't get into discussion of in this meeting. Key points on Dock 16, 2,500 pounds per square foot live load capacity. It can handle a larger vessel than Dock 15 can. What we want to try to do is take advantage of the Panama Canal deepening, which 2014 or 2015, depends on who you ask. But nevertheless, increasing the maximum beam width of the vessel that can come through, and also the draft. So this is, as we had originally talked about, you know, our marching orders were to design both Dock 16 and Dock 6 for 50-foot future draft vessels. We are making provisions for the foundations, not the rails per se, but the foundations. If at some point, if you ever wanted to come in and install a gantry crane or container crane, the foundation of the dock is capable of withstanding that load. So we're not putting those in right now, not putting in the rails in per se, but it wouldn't be a lot of cost to retrofit the structure to be able to do that in the future. And some other amenities, high mast lighting, and then we also have kind of the need was decided for a restroom facility at Dock 15 as well. Well, we talked about that in probably more detail than you would expect. And it was decided, I guess, if commissioners approve this, the users really wanted to have a separate restroom facility over there for several reasons. So, and if we go forward, this is there's a couple of other things included. Assuming the Tiger grant comes through, you know, there's likely to be there's funding associated with the rail spur that serves the back of both 15 and 16, and also there's provisions in the grant application as it stands today for a new electrically powered mobile harbor crane, similar to the Gotwald you have, just electrically powered, due to cut down on emissions and make it more of a green place to be. I know what y'all are going to say. I won't go into a lot of detail on this. I killed you guys last time. But key points is that Dock 16, for the most part, can be built from land, and this is the base bid. This is the 600-foot section. Construction sequence would go something like, you come in and you drive this, this is called a combi wall. It's a steel pipe and steel sheet pile interlocked section. You drive it in segments as you go along. Then you come in and you drive these plumb piles. These are pre-stressed, precast concrete. The soil is at this level when you start construction. Come in and cast, this is called the relieving platform. This serves as a load distribution mechanism to go into the piles. And this also houses the post-tensioning rods that anchor the bulkhead back to these anchor piles. And then some ballast, and then dock paving on top, and then the cap out front and fendering. So once you get all that done, then you can come in and then dredge out in front of the wharf. Keep in mind, this is, as we had originally discussed, because of the gap that exists between Dock 15 and 16, that area had part of it's already dredged, part of it has shoreline protection that needs to be dealt with, and so we can't. It's not economical to try to build the same cross section in this 300-foot infill section as we are on the 600-foot base bid. So this is an open wharf. You don't have a bulkhead out front. All this is open. This is the existing shoreline that's dashed. The final submerged slope or underwater shoreline would look, would look something like this. We're still debating on whether we need scour protection or not. That's not been decided on yet. That's something that we'll deal with in final design. But most of the dredging would need to be done prior to construction of this dock. So what we've done is gone through all the construction sequencing methodology. Actually had a marine contractor come in, and we have our own constructability group. They looked through it. We had a separate opinion. Marine contractor came in. He looked at it. We went through our thoughts, incorporated what few comments that they had. So we feel like we've got a very constructible package. It's something that shouldn't create a lot of issues once the package hits the streets. And although contractors, a lot of them have their own ideas as to how to do things, this is a public job, and what we're trying to do is establish a good basis for everyone to bid from and go forward. So piles driven out in the water, cast in place pile caps, precast concrete deck planks with a cast-in-place concrete topping on top, and that makes it kind of a composite design. So bulkhead at the rear of the structure, as your shoreline comes up here, and then your ground surface is back here at this point. So that's a little bit about Dock 16 and the infill. Oil Dock 6, we had Dock 16 didn't, the 3D rendering didn't really, it wasn't real exciting, I guess is the right word to use. So
Straight concrete.
this shows a whole lot better, it shows the features of Oil Dock 6 better. Essentially, it's a dock platform here that we've talked with the users about in terms of appropriate space allocations for things. The port's going to throw in the hydraulic hose handling crane. These marine loading arms here are not provided by the port. Typically, that's something that the users or tenants provide, and I guess there's been discussions with Transmontane. They're certainly willing to do that. You have a fendering system for the dock platform. That's usually just for barges. The ship resting structures exist out here, and there's a setback between this face and these fenders. So the ship should never touch your dock platform. And meeting with all the line handlers and such, kind of work through line handling schemes and how to get messenger lines over to your mooring structures and things like that. So approachway out to the dock, pipe supports. The pipe bridge originally was not part of our scope. There's been some discussions with users. There's got to be a bulkhead here and that's something that only part of Oil Dock 5 has. If some of you have been to Oil Dock 5, it's got a submerged slope that worked out well. The design dredge depth here is 40. This is 50 plus 2 plus 1, and Oil Dock 5 was 42 plus 2 plus 1. So that makes a big difference on projecting the side slopes up, and it creates a need for the bulkhead back here. And this is parking and the tenant's pipeline and utilities and such. So I think I probably just went through that. Again, we're trying to capture a larger design vessel than was contemplated for Oil Dock 5 as well. So looking for things that be able to take advantage of the canal widening here too as well.
Jeff, if I may, when we went through the discussions about, looking at costs and all that, and whether or not to cut back on both of these structures and just say, okay, well, just make them the way they are, there really wasn't that big a difference on cost savings. So that's why, we were talking in the scheme of when you see the total budget, I think it was like, on the bulk cargo dock, it was maybe $1 million, $1.5 million. On the Oil Dock 6, it was a little bit more significant. But when you look at the big scheme of the whole things, what you would get for a 50-foot draft and that capability for the future, and the fact that they would be able to currently, even now, take a bigger vessel that we currently take in, it didn't make much sense to cut it. So we left it at 50 feet.
That's consistent with the documents that we have prepared for the preliminary design, as well as what we're requesting in the Tiger grant.
Your increased pipeline capacity, what are we talking about there?
We would have the ability to
do
essentially, well, one is that the users, right now there's limited capacity for storage. So, the users, the Transmontanes, the Deep Southwest, would increase capacity to handle more volume coming in over it because of the new dock.
Okay.
So you'd be increasing the pipeline capacity to handle more product as a result of this facility.
Any questions related to specifically Cargo Dock 16 or Oil Dock 6? I'll be happy to hang around after the presentation this evening to go over any details if you'd like. So, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mike. Mike's kind of been ramrodding our Tiger grant team. It's been a pretty extensive effort. It's a moving target. A lot of work to be done in a short period of time. So Mike's been trying to corral corral the troops. And Eddie and Adiel have been a lot of help in this process, because and Donna as well. Just trying to get as many thoughts on paper and get as creative as we can. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I like to talk about money, especially if it's money coming from someone else to help build projects that are going to help develop an area. I have a background as a port engineer, and it's very important to try to gather up all your financial resources and look towards the future in order to develop the local economy. What we've done here for the...
Get the light back on?
Oh, I'll flip through some more.
Oh.
Hey, we're not done with PowerPoint yet.
Okay.
I don't have too many slides. Jeff had the most of them, though. As Jeff mentioned earlier, there are several components. What we've been designing is the oil dock and the cargo dock. However, we've been working with Norma and the rest of the staff and trying to figure out what can we do for rail that would enhance the projects. So what they've come up with is a north rail yard. We've looked at a 2-spur and a 5-spur scenario. And then we also looked at putting a rail spur on the cargo docks. That was one of the things that the stevedores mentioned to us during some of our user meetings, and then also on site and meeting with them, that they said that would greatly enhance their use of the cargo dock area. And also in going through the Tiger Grant criteria, backing up a little bit, one of the things that Eddie mentioned about a month ago in looking at trying to get some cost savings by going to a shallower draft was perhaps we could add in a crane for the Tiger Grant instead of having the money all lumped into the design of the projects. So what we decided was to put it in there anyway. A lot of the Tiger Grant material is focused on environmental criteria and sustainability for long-term low-energy use. So we've taken a look at some of those things. Money question. Cargo Dock 16. What we have is the 2 parts. We have $28 million for the base bid and $12 million for the infill area. Oil Dock 6 is $23 million. Electric crane is about $5.5 million. And then we have some numbers for the north rail yard and the cargo dock railroad sidings. So we're asking in our grant, it's about $73.5 million. We're still tweaking out a couple things. The final number is probably going to be between $73 and $74 million.
And we're still debating whether or not to include some of the money for the disposal site, the DMPA upgrades as well. So that could not be that much. That might help us round it off a little bit.
Right. Some of the DMPA work has to be completed before the Tiger Grants are even announced in order to facilitate channel maintenance. We've already taken a look at the cargo dock and oil dock, so I won't go through that again with you. But what we have here is the 5-spur or the 5-rail North Yard project. And we have about a $3 million price tag associated with that. Here we have the cargo dock spur. You can see where it's coming off the main track, running towards dock 15, extending all the way down past the warehouses, and then running back the length of dock 16.
It's that one in white with the brown broken dot, right.
Yeah.
The green is already there.
And the green part's there. And that's what would be built.
That's not actually, is it actually on the dock, or is it just?
No, it's behind the
Behind
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
It's behind the road.
right behind the road.
Yeah, and don't want to put it on the dock.
I was about to say.
No, don't want
But
to
you'd
do
have
that.
it between the dock and the shed.
Yes, that's
Right.
correct. Yeah.
And it would be flush with the concrete surface, so you'd still be able to drive over it.
The only add-on that we had today, well, this last few, like I said, every time we keep talking is that because that design, I mean, we've been going back and forth with this for quite some time and looking at different, I think this probably makes the most sense. I know Norma looked at it and her staff from an operational standpoint, impact on surrounding tenants was to go with this design, and then also to go in and throw in a track mobile, which would do a couple of things. One is obviously you can use it just for that area, and more importantly, it also helps because the fact that you're taking a locomotive off of that, it helps you in scoring points as it relates to emission control and do they make electric track mobiles? Because if they do, we'll go get one of those and try to enhance our grant. But we would do that. All of that is a big component of the Tiger grant on the environmental side.
Yeah, just going back to these numbers. What the Tiger grant is, just a little bit of background. Tiger grant is part of the federal stimulus budget. Right. It was a program that was announced in May that had some draft regulations associated with it for implementation. All the administrators kind of have their hands up in the air going, how do we evaluate, how do we score? But there are some key things, if you don't mind me, I'll just sit on them real quick. But there's primary and secondary, and then there's also program specific, which means sports. Under the primary, you have long-term outcomes, which are looking at state of good repair, economic competitiveness, and actually that's one point that's very much in Brownsville's favor, is that they're looking for economically distressed areas in order to put money towards. And unfortunately, Brownsville falls under that criteria, but that's going to be a great help in getting the grant. We're also looking at sustainability, which is, like I said, the environmental part of it. The safety, if you pull trucks off the road, you're going to reduce an awful lot of traffic accidents. That's another big thing that we're pushing. And then also livability, improving life of people around by increasing higher wage jobs. And that's another big one in Brownsville favor in the scoring criteria. Secondary, there's various things in there about environmental, just a lot of frou-frou type stuff, but the primary criteria, Brownsville has very high scoring potential. So we feel very good about the likelihood of scoring there. One of the big things that we have is the new freight with Seabridge, that new freight line from Port Manatee. What that does is it creates a large regional economic impact. It takes tremendous amount of trucks off the road and increases jobs, increases reliability, environmental aspects of it. You're taking trucks out of Houston, which is a non-attainment area. There's just so many positive environmental aspects about it.
How big is the Tiger grant pot right now?
The entire appropriation was $1.5 billion, of which $300 million might be, or is up to $300 million is allowed to be used by for administrating the loans. So 1.2 billion is looked to be handed out. 300 million maximum to an individual state.
For individual projects.
There's going to be a lot of competition for it.
Yeah.
And that's where the key aspects of economically distressed areas and the regional impact of having the two ports not teaming up together, but definitely linkage between the two ports in our applications. That's been expressed as a very desirable thing by one of the administrations looking at the grants.
Secretary LaHood has been, since the criteria was published in the Federal Register back in the first part of middle of June, he's been pretty consistent in the message in that this round of stimulus money is really for the entities that didn't get any of the first go around, and that's focusing on railroads and ports. And that message has been consistent. Wouldn't you say, Randy? I mean, that's... Yeah. But, so that's consistent with what we have, within HDR, we have several people working with different entities on these grant applications all over the country. That message is very consistent. So we have a feel of kind of what's going on in Texas relative to port applications and things like that. So
does the secretary have the final say-so, or who's going to have that absolute final say-so? Has that been determined yet?
So as we both turn and look.
Technically, Secretary Hood has the final say-so. Needless to say, I mean, that's the administration,
right?
The president that one. But LaHood has been very outspoken about prioritizing ports and port infrastructure and intermodalism, which we touch. I think a good indicator is out of 60 applications in the state of Texas.
98.
98.
98. 98.
We tied for second.
Wow.
In those. So that gives you, I think, a pretty good.
Yeah, we
Same.
try to touch all of the points and the key aspects of it: intermodality, freight movement, efficiency, of course, economic distress areas, environmentally sensitivity. I mean, we think we've packaged an application that looks at all of them and doesn't just focus on just trying to make this another road project because it's stimulus dollars.
What was number one, Randy?
There was a project in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, a rail project, and then,
So congested area.
yeah, and our project was tied with a rail project in the Houston area. We were the highest ranked in Texas of all the port projects specifically, but there was only 2 ranked in the top 10. So one comment about this, this looks at the individual prices, especially when you look at Dock 16. It's got the original dock and then the 300-foot fill-in. But it is conceivable that, you know, we're obviously very optimistic that we were to get this award, that probably you could look at how you bid this and realize some savings. I mean, these are substantial projects. You know, I'm sure that if I say this, somebody who's watching out there is going to call my attention to, but I don't know of what local contractor capability you would have on these kinds of projects, especially for maritime and marine type work. It is one of the things that you could look at in the future, and of course that's a decision down the road, but you know, if you were to combine them and have one contractor bid on all of them, I mean, there could be some economies of scale, there could be some timing issues, there could be some ways of reducing the cost, you know, a few $1 million when you got down to build these things. But I mean, that's still down the road. You know, right now we decided to address these as individual program elements. It's all going to be part of the same application. It's called the Brownsville Navigation District Interport Expansion Project. I mean, that is our project. And these are going to be the program elements that are going to give us that $73 or $74 million total that we're going to request.
Do we know yet if one came under, let's say we wanted to buy the electric crane, came in at $4 million, could you use that $1.5 million somewhere else, or we don't know yet?
Yeah, we don't know that. That's way down the road, but
Okay.
I mean, I think that those are probably good problems to have.
I agree.
It's excellent.
Very good.
Okay, well, schedule. I guess that's kind of an important thing. As Eddie mentioned earlier, they're due next week. We're looking at actually hitting the send button. They're to be filed electronically, hitting the send button on Monday, because with all the thousands of people hitting the send button on Tuesday, we don't want to be one of those who get the sorry did not go through messages. The final design, this assumes that we take final design, start work on that within the next week or so. We have a lot of work to do. 2010. And over a 4-month period, we have probably a good 6 months worth of hard work to do. We have 10 people dedicated to the project right now, working full-time on it, and another 7, 8 people are working part-time on the project. So we have put a lot of resources to it, but we still need to keep the gas pedal down in order to get completed. As Jeff was talking about the core permits earlier, we're pretty confident we're going to get those before the end of the year. Tiger grant criteria says you don't have to have the permits in hand, but we want to be pretty confident that you've applied for it and you're going to have them pretty soon after the grants are announced. Same thing about engineering. They say, well, you need to prove that you have adequate preliminary engineering done when you submit the application. And we've accomplished that. But they also want to be able to have the projects start as soon as they award the projects. So the Tiger announcements are going to be in January. Originally they had stated it was going to be February, but in a press release last month, they moved it up a month. The whole concept of stimulus money is to get the money out there as fast as they can. And that's another thing that they're looking at, is spending the money as fast as you can. So we're looking at an advertising for the project. We want to make sure we have an adequate period in order to entice companies from around the country is if you do package bids up together and you have a $60 million, $70 million construction project, you're going to attract the big ones. And they're definitely going to be interested. And they're the ones who have the capability to get the project done. We're just assuming awarding the bid sometime in April and issue the notice to proceed soon thereafter. Construction to start up immediately. There's a lot of base work to do, but they still also have to get the steel ordered. That's a big part of this project. So getting a notice to proceed and getting that steel ordered is going to be a real important thing. The construction schedule that we put together, albeit aggressive, it is doable. Contractors that we've met with agree that provided you have the adequate manpower and the right type of equipment, that you can get it done by the end of December of 2011. The Tiger regulations require that the projects be done by February of 2012. Once again, they want the money out there, they want the money spent, they want to get jobs created, they want the investment, they want the long-term economic growth associated with the projects.
Sounds good.
This is, and then kind of the comment you had earlier on approving the invoices, and if you really look at final design, I mean, that's where we're at right now. You know, obviously, HCR has not moved to final design. If we were to decide that, you know what, we've got enough information for the purposes of the TIE grant submitting it, and if we were to get it, the risk we run is that February deadline for completion of all the projects, because you would really be, you know, pressing it, or if we were to get a notice in January, for example, that our grant was approved, and then we go to go ahead and move to final design at that time, you're talking about February, March, April, May, before you could, I mean, this whole thing gets moved. So, I mean, you know, do we want to roll the dice and say, you know, let's not do it because, you know, we may not get the grant, or, you know what, if we get the grant, we got to be ready to go.
What's the final price for the final design?
Well, the Dock 16, the total was going to be $2 million in round figures, and Oil Dock 6 was $1 million. I think that to move on to final design on both projects, you're talking about $1.4 million left of work to do. And when we got into this, we said you're going to be looking at some big numbers.
Roll the dice.
Recall, and you know, these are.
Yeah.
You know, this is a problem. The other thing too is that if you know, we do that and we move on, you know, I think, and if we're not successful in the Tiger grant, we're going to have to revisit moving on one of these two capital projects in some form or fashion.
Can you go back to the numbers?
Don't ever let an engineer use anything electronic. Thank you.
Just design it. There you go.
Yep.
That's it. 73.9.
Yeah, and you're only talking about 16 and 6 when you get into the final design aspect. Electric crane, obviously, that's different. Rail, north rail, sidings, you know, that's all going to be, I think Norma's got all the design already for north rail yard, and the siding on 15 and 16, you know, we can do that and work with that. That's not going to be a whole lot. It's just completing everything you need for the first two projects. I mean, those are the biggies.
Yep. Totally agree.
So, what do we need to do, Adam?
Well, at this point, unless there's any reason to alter the schedule, we're going to move forward with it. Now, one thing, too, I do want to say that is a real important part of the Tiger grant. You know, for us, it's not only, you know, what it means for us in the future in terms of, you know, future business and growth and really sustainability of the port, but when you look at the oil docks and you look at, you know, we have 4 of them, and 3 of them are, I mean, ready for the bendición. We need Oil Dock 6. Right. Only if, worst case scenario, that if we had to take one out of service, you know, right now we lose business. Right. If we had Oil Dock 6, and then we can begin to form a plan on how to address the others, and we could afford to take one out of service to fix it or to do something with it. Without that capability, instead of trying to sustain or grow our business, we're going to go backwards. So Oil Dock 6 is really critical. And, we don't know how they're going to do this. This is new for the federal government. If they approach us and said, hey, we can't give you the whole thing, what will you take? Well, the one thing says, well, gee, take the big project. But if you really look at where it has the biggest impact on the port in terms of our business right now and over the last few years, and where the greatest incremental growth will come from, it's going to be the oil dock. I mean, that's what's keeping us going now. It has been. It's going to continue to grow. But our approach is that all of these are critical. They're critical to the sustainability of the region, to jobs, to all of the things that we need for our area. So.
Are these complete the Tiger Grant money? Are those complete numbers? In other words, are they going to give us the whole money for it, or are we going to have a contribution?
Well, we will have some expense in this. Right now there's no requirement for a match. I mean, it's 100% grant. There's no requirement that says that you have to kick in so much, dollar for dollar. There's none of that. Right now it's putting money to where it has the biggest impact in terms of creating jobs, sustaining the economy and all those great things.
And then what we're doing is preparing for that, and we're investing in that, so we're ready to go. And even if we had to decide on one of the two projects, for the grant, we could go with the Dock 16 and put in the money that we've been saving for Dock
number 6,
without a doubt,
for Oil Dock 6, and do both projects. I mean, we already started with design and all the initial work for that, and we're prepared to go forward with it. So, I mean, if it came down to that, I think we could do both probably.
For the Port of Brownsville, that would be a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Eddie,
Got that far.
can I ask you two questions? One, we haven't looked at any expansion of storage capacity, and that's one of the other areas that we need to address at some time, because when they unload all these ships of the oil, they need to have a place to put it.
Outdoor storage, I don't think is going to be a problem for us. Most of this stuff, what we're seeing in the future is not stuff that's going to sit in the port a long time. I mean, we're trying to develop Dock 16 as really the foundation to grow our container business. That's in and out. But yes. But we do have, one thing about storage is we have significant land space available, and then we have the capability of doing that. Yeah.
The storage space that I'm talking about, referring to, is for liquid cargo.
The users of the facility have indicated that they will be adding capacity.
Right. And the other question I have is the money that we are expending today reimbursable to us under the grant?
No. The part of the grant is that, well, I was going to make the comment that this is what you're seeing. What you may see in our final grant is a much larger number, because one is the money we're expending just on this process, but we have other projects that we're showing that we're making contributions and infrastructure improvements at the port, and we intend to leverage everything we can to show that we do have some skin in the game as it relates to spending money on developing the port. Whether it's the road improvement project, whether it's trying to tie in some of the other regional commitments to the regional road improvements, of course, the design, all of that we're going to try to throw in there.
Security upgrades, all the things.
Everything we can think of. In fact, it hasn't just been Donna, myself, and Ariel. It's been Joe Garza. It's been Tony. It's been Joe Saban with data numbers on overweight corridor and truck traffic. It's been Herman. Everybody's been part of this. Debbie, the spreadsheet to drop off. I mean, the whole staff has a role in some part of this, and we're going to try to paint a much bigger picture than just showing the $73 million.
And I appreciate that, and you've answered my question. Thank you.
Dock 16 and Dock 6 does not include the MPA upgrades?
Correct.
they're not supposed to be included, or they don't want that
decision was made earlier
included?
not to, but we were having that conversation again today.
What the upgrades are, basically, what we need to do is we need to raise some of the levies to increase the capacity. And a lot of that work needs to be done because right now, the Corps is working on a
Maintenance dredge.
contract for a maintenance dredge
In
that
October.
should start October, November this year. And they have about 2 to 3 million cubic yards of spoil that they anticipate that they'll be needing space for. So as we're working to provide that capacity, we're also going to provide for this. The capacity required for both docks here is about 500,000 cubic yards. So it's only a fraction of what the Corps is going to need for their expansion.
Okay. So it may not be cost effective to run a separate project.
Yeah.
Makes sense. You could raise one of the levies by 1 foot to accommodate what we need.
And like Jeff said, we're expecting within the next few days a proposal from, in fact, it's actually an expansion of an existing fast corridor that was started last year, analyzing the various placement areas, but now we integrated it to the maintenance dredge.
We're not talking about a lot of money anyway. You want to...
Right, yeah, we're talking, what we evaluated for DMPA 7 was approximately $1 million, slight less than $1 million to handle the capacity for these 2 projects. But it doesn't really make sense to improve number 7, though.
No, see, we can create that capacity in aid with a lot less
Far less
investment.
money.
I need
Makes
to
sense.
clarify.
Thank you.
Commissioner Reed's question about whose decision. There's actually a committee called the Tiger Committee within the USDOT that will be evaluating
All that.
the applications. But at the end of the day, I think
It's
one would be naive to think
secretary.
that it would not have the Secretary's vote.
Thank you.
So if it's due on the 15th, please do not call between now and the 15th. Seriously tied up with this thing. I mean, it's all of the attention between now and the 15th is going to be on getting this thing done. But you can see the implications to the port if we're successful are going to be huge. Absolutely
Tremendously
huge.
Okay, and because everyone's used to seeing a PowerPoint wrapped up here with some printers.
On the end.
I think I saw those out there in the flash.
That's discarded items, right? Yeah, that's
Did you put that one up there, Robert?
That's in your dredge disposal site, Martin.
That's disposal site.
You need to show your other 2.
Okay, well, yeah, I have 2 more here. Same there you go. These pictures were taken within the last couple of weeks, so. And then that's the best picture of them all.
Man, I sure didn't catch that. I don't know how I went over there.
That's Alaska, right?
Yeah.
Just beautiful.
Fishing with dynamite.
We're going to stay on schedule, and we're proceeding with,
Go for it.
we'll do our best to compete for that grant.
I'll make a motion on that, Mr. Chairman. Item number...
So that's,
It's just a presentation.
it was just a presentation on that, so, we'll move on to, thank you for your
Enthusiasm.
enthusiasm.
like...
We got another presentation, item number 6, presentation by Cielo Wind Power regarding proposed wind energy project north of State Highway 48.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me, Chairman, Commissioners, Director. Oh, yeah, sure, that'd be great. I did not prepare a PowerPoint presentation, I just wanted to give you guys an update.
Thank you.
Good deal.
To be honest, you guys would be away if I had prepared one, so that's a good thing. That I didn't. But anyway, the last time that I was here was July 14th, and that's when you guys authorized Cielo to negotiate an amendment of the existing lease that we have with the port. And this map that you're holding in your hands, the green box represents the existing lease. It's 2476 acres. And Some reason for the amendment of that lease centered around clarifying the development term and, how long we needed it in order to develop a project. Updating the terms. That original lease was negotiated in 2002, and so we felt that was only fair, given that it's 2009. And then also, you'll see the orange triangle, and CLO proposes to increase the acreage of the existing lease. And also the orange line that you see is to allow for a transmission line from the substation on the project to the point of interconnect in order to actually get the power to market. So this schematic represents the nature of the lease discussion that we're having. And the reason why I want to come by this evening was to give you an update on the progress of those negotiations, the progress of the project at large. And as kind of a good segue to the PowerPoint and presentation just before this, just to remind you guys, why now? Why are we back? Why are we having this conversation? It's surrounding the same kind of discussion that was just had regarding stimulus funds. So this is an opportunity now to take government funds, and it's a combination of what we're looking at is a combination of ITC, investment tax credit, with federal loan guarantee dollars. And the status on that solicitation actually, since I just wanted to give you that piece before I talk about the lease, because it's fresh on the whole government funding segue. On July 29, the Department of Energy released a solicitation. It's very excited about it. There's $30 billion in the federal loan guarantees. This was a $8.5 billion solicitation. However, when I read it, it turns out that it's an expansion of an earlier loan guarantee program that they had, which is an expansion on innovative technology, so it didn't apply to commercial wind. And the wind community is just waiting for the solicitation to come out any day for the other billions of dollars that will be applicable to commercial wind. So, but it is really good to be able to understand what the components of the things that they're going to be looking for and to gear up and get ready. And so there's a lot of similarities that we're facing too regarding, we talked about investing in final design before you get a grant, or investing in permitting, and you can't run a concurrent permitting timeline with construction, those kinds of things. So that's part of that update. I want to just walk you through a few of the highlights in the lease and where we are in that negotiation at this point. So as we've talked about before, what we're envisioning is about an 80 megawatt project. What we're envisioning is at least half of that being on port property. And we're looking at obviously the expansion of the lease to 4,000, well, after it's surveyed, we'll understand exactly how much, but around 4,200 acres. Most of the layout...
Excuse me, 4,200 total or 4,200 port?
4,200 port. Most of the layout of the array that we're looking at, now granted, the final layout only comes after all of the data collection that goes into the permitting process. Because obviously, we're going to comply with all federal and state permits and environmental regulations. And so, therefore, the final layout has to be driven by that. But one of the other permits that we have to get is an FAA permit. So on this map, you see the purple area. That is the FAA instrument approach boundary for the Brownsville International Airport. And so where you see it overlay, the orange triangle is basically where we cannot put turbines in that lower realm. However, it's sort of graded. It's like graded going upwards, so that as you get further up, you can go like 100 feet, 150 feet, 200 feet in terms of the height of the obstruction that can exist within that instrument approach path. So CLO originally just proposed this as a lease area because it's important to us to have a wind non-obstruct zone where we're protecting a certain amount of height or structures or obstructions that would obstruct the wind that's coming from the southeast. So that's the reason why we didn't just carve out around that approach boundary and why we presented it as that whole area. Another thing I want to talk about acreage, because I know that the port is sensitive to uses of your acreage and how you can maximize your revenue stream from your asset of your acreage that you have. And so there's a couple of things that the lease does, and in its entirety, for any acre of land, there are other uses that are completely acceptable: ranching, agriculture. It calls these things out in the lease: marine, industrial uses, if notice is given and it's not actually in the footprint of the project. There's also another concept within the lease that's called relinquished land. It's kind of an interesting concept, but it essentially is anywhere a half mile or more from any turbine that property will be relinquished, so that after the project is built, there will be another amendment to the lease that will go in and clarify the exact acreage that is needed for the project. But that there's still that wind non-obstruct overlay as well. So it's a bit complicated in the way that it's set up. And you know, Dan and I have in the past 2 months, we've had probably 6 meetings, 7 turns of the document. It's been a very active volley, and this is something that I understand. I think Dan's mapping out the flow chart.
Yeah, I've actually done a chart on what they keep, what we keep, and what the different easements mean.
Okay.
And I'm still trying to get my head around it. I'm understanding it better.
Sounds like we're gonna need a PowerPoint presentation on this.
Another one. Not from me.
But are you, you're saying you're at least 4,200 acres, or proposing at least 4,200, but once the turbines are built, would you lease less acreage at that point?
Basically what you do is you relinquish anything that is not within a half a mile from a turbine, but you retain the easement, the access road easement and the transmission line easement, and the wind non-obstruct that you originally had.
Okay.
So then you have to ponder, well, what is it that you can do now that you couldn't do before? So that's the question, really. But because really there's concurrent uses that can happen. But the idea is that we don't want anything in the public record that's tying up or encumbering property that's doesn't need to be.
And our lease, are we going to have if CLO were to fail, are they going to have to put up a bond or to tear those things down if they don't do them?
Yeah, the current discussion is that, and this is typical of these types of leases, is that they put up a bond at the point that the cost of removal would be more than the salvage value of the turbines. In year one, we could actually make money by taking them down and selling them for scrap. But you can actually calculate, and midway through the lease, maybe year 10, the balance changes, and at that point they will be required to put up a bond that would pay the cost of removing them. They don't want to put the bond up in year one because we're not really at any risk at that point, and that's pretty typical that you'll see that they don't have to put it up immediately.
But at what point year 2?
My recollection is that it's about year 9. What we're talking about is a 25-year operating agreement.
But let's say CLO goes bankrupt, they go away in year 3 or 4.
Well,
what happens at that point?
Things are salvageable, right?
I mean,
what is the lifespan of one
Well,
of these?
it's really, the lifespan matches the term. So
Okay.
it's in its entirety, it's a 29-year term at maximum,
Okay.
with the construction term and the initial term of 25 years.
Now, what I'm getting at is,
Right.
y'all go away, you no longer exist. Those turbines are standing up there, not generating any income for us, and royalties are lease payments because you're defunct. We're going to have to spend money to tear those things down.
Well, not if they're generating.
No, but I'm saying they're not
Well, let me
buying
speak to
wind
that,
power
if
anymore.
if you allow me.
Okay.
There are, the structure of these deals is multi-layered, and even just talking about the DOE federal loan guarantee aspect of it, what we do is we're a developer. So we come in and do the front-end work, and we always have development capital. It's not our development capital. It's not our $300 million that we're bringing. We're going in, bringing in a financial institution. In this case, with the federal loan guarantee, what they're contemplating is an 80-20 scenario where you bring your 20% money and then you have your federal loan guarantee funds as well. And so we would have a debt club, a partnership that would develop the project, and there are very strict requirements in the lease for any types of assignabilities, types of requirements of that relationship and the other entities that would be involved in the project. There's also the power purchase agreement that goes alongside these deals, and so all of the entities that are involved because it's very lucrative, and so once it is built and it is performing and it's in everyone's interest, it's a money maker. So it's in everyone's interest for it to continue to perform, and it's very valuable in that regard. And so that's the concept of the removal bond coming in at like year 10, is that it's sort of coming in and putting that insurance, when the improvements begin to become less valuable. So then you've got that backup in there as well. So what I could do, if I'd be happy to share more detail on the financial structure of these deals.
Because what I just don't want to have happen is the port get hung out there.
Right.
For whatever reason, tax credits go away, your consortium goes away, the financial markets collapse.
Market changes.
Markets, whatever. And you're not supposed to put up this bond until year 9.
Right.
But year 5, y'all go away.
So
You
what
know,
we
the port
probably
has to go out
should
there and
do
start
is tie a
tearing down.
clause to performance bond to some sort of assignability aspect or some transferability.
I mean, I know it can be
We'll have
worked
to work
out.
on that and
Right,
figure it
right.
out, but
Right.
I hear your point.
Okay. Thank you.
I was hoping that since these are renewable energy, that you would be able to maintain those turbines in such a way that because you were replenishing and replacing as you went along, that you would not need to totally throw them away in 29 years.
Well, we don't really want to do that either. I think that what we heard was we want a deal that on its face, what's the value for this term? And then what does that look like at the end of that term for reevaluating new deal terms, new technology, the relationship, those kinds of things. Definitely there's an entire operations and maintenance arm that coincides the lifespan of the project that is maintaining the turbines, and so the goal is not to actually, we don't want to remove them, we want to continue to perform and do deals with you and make money, but
As Tennessee Army Ford used to say, referred to as his pea-picking brain, I would like to think that as the technology evolves of wind energy, upgrades will be the generators that you're using today will be the Model Ts of, or the low biplanes instead of jet airplanes like we have today in the future. So, but the basic structure where you're setting this thing,
The foundation.
the foundation and everything that you're putting this on should be, something, if it's built right, you could take off one and put another one on, upgrade these as you went.
And that's a decision that will need to be made by the parties, including the port at that time, on what your best interest is and what you want to do. And we want to give you that power because it's your power in the first place. So the concept being a 29-year term so that, at that point, those decisions can be made. I certainly agree with you. When I started in the industry in '02, we were using 1 megawatt machines, and we're contemplating 2.3 megawatt machines now. And so that's in, 7 years. So, 3 times that, maybe, I don't know. But then you get into all of the other scientific aspects of harnessing the wind and how large that machine is and how large is too large and what's economies of scale and what makes sense from a standpoint of infrastructure and output. So, and speaking of output, we do have a contract with, when we go into these deals, there's got to be an offtake arrangement, and that's a 20-year deal. So it's imperative that we're delivering a product and that output, and so obviously the maintenance is critical, that we're delivering or we're in default. I mean, it's a very serious arrangement, to deliver this product. So
PUB is still who you are planning on developing this, to deliver most of the product to.
The PUB is still very supportive of the project. The PUB doesn't have the capacity to take all of the power from the project. It's not realistic. But if we are able to, the kinds of PPA discussions that we are having right now, power purchase agreement discussions we're having right now, surround the concept of, if this funding is secured, this federal funding, then we deliver at this price, and they say, well, we like that price. If you can give us that price, then we'll buy power from you. So it's a contingent-based type arrangement that is, hinged to the viability of the DOE funding.
Well, we would also be able to do more at the port in developing our port if we have the capacity for electrical power available here at a reasonable price.
You're like going right down my...
Oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean to get ahead of you. Okay. Let me ask you
No, it's good.
Mr. Chairman.
Because that dovetails into the conversations that I've had with the EDC. And I met with many members of the EDC, and I read with interest the Imagine Brownsville Master Plan and the vision for the community and the renewable energy component and the concept of, that, an installation such as this is effectively a kind of a gateway to opportunities in renewable energy, manufacturing opportunities, etc. And we are already setting up meetings with Siemens, with the EDC to do everything that we can to make those introductions. And it's not, is it, just about our project? No, because we want to have a relationship and we see a real future here. And so to the extent that we can, help forge those relationships, we want to do that. And so yes.
Daniel, on the rent, what are we proposing, a base rent and an escalating rent over the years, or?
There's both a minimum guarantee and a royalty, and both of them escalate over time. I think there's 2 bumps over the course of the production period.
What's the base rent?
Why don't we talk about that in executive session, if that's okay?
Okay.
No problem.
How many wind turbines, remind me again, were you going to put in?
Sure, we were looking at a minimum
14 or-
of 17
Okay.
on your property.
The overall project, how many would you have in the overall, are you prepared to talk about?
Well, for a 2.3 megawatt machine, if you were going to do an 80 megawatt project, then you're looking at about 39.
So and you would be putting, how many on our property?
17.
17, so you're looking at, yeah, another 60.
I'm sorry, 34.
Yeah.
35, not 39.
So
35.
we're doing about
I'm not,
50% of them on our
I'm used to a
property.
calculator.
50, about half of them on our property,
Yes,
half of them somewhere else.
They don't get something done at a certain point.
I also wanted to share that we did secure an option for the tract of land that is north of the existing lease. Right, I mean, I'll update my math. So that's good news. And the concept there is a favored nations arrangement, which is basically means that they don't want you guys to get a better deal than them, and we don't want them to get a better deal than you guys. So everybody's going to get the same deal.
It's the old police and fire Me Too clause.
Exactly. So we're fine with that, and what they've done is they've signed an option, and then they're just going to wait and follow. Would be their preference.
We're still planning on the 23rd, right? That's the goal?
That's what we're
That's our
shooting.
goal, and that was why I wanted to come tonight and share with you where we are. I think I did want to just mention one other thing, which is that the timeline is critical on this project. We obviously can't run a concurrent permitting timeline with construction, so I want to get out there in October if we get this thing finalized. And we've already done a 4-season avian study, and we've already done some wetland study, but we need to go back and do it again. And we're already anticipating the kinds of things that the Department of Energy would expect. So we're going to go ahead and move forward with that because we don't want to miss, timing. And regarding timing, in order to be eligible for the investment tax credit, they want construction to start by 12/31/2010. So that would be a very short permitting timeline, 12 to 14 month permitting timeline. It may or may not be feasible to do it in that time, but we're going to get after it and see that we can. And then the federal loan guarantee deadline is to begin construction by September 30th, 2011. That one obviously is much more achievable, but we're going to do everything we can to try to take advantage of all opportunities.
And we want them to. I mean, we want them to adhere to timelines and not get into the situation where we have a multi-year lease and nothing's happening. I think that's been kind of the premise of the discussions from the beginning. The only other thing I want to tell you is that we have provided Cielo a letter of support that they can take to, help them put their project together. So.
And I'm remiss, and I got off track, so apologize. That was one of the things that I wanted to thank you for.
It's okay.
So,
I'm sure anybody at this table would have done the same thing.
Of course.
So, did y'all have any other questions for me?
Ms. Miller, I do. Prior to the stimulus buzzword, Cielo, you folks are not new to this area here, and you folks were doing feasibility studies before then. And assuming that this project falls short, that we don't get any stimulus monies, have you folks discussed Plan B or discussed anything, there's alternate plans, for example, if that should fall short? Would you still pursue doing something like that?
Well, let me tell you, the third timeline is, production tax credit right now. The PTC is extended until the end of 2012. So that's the third opportunity.
Okay.
In our construction term, what we're contemplating is a construction term till the end of 2011 with a one-year option to extend that construction term based upon benchmarks that are like, we've got a offtake agreement inked. We can demonstrate all of the things that we've done from a permitting, and if we're just sitting and waiting on finalization of a permit, but we've gone through the process and we can show all of those benchmarks, and so we're putting those things into the lease. But ultimately, if we are not able to, within the 2 and then on the outside chance 3-year construction timeline, I think that it would be another discussion really, and it would be a different set of, different framework, and we would need to discuss that
And
out of respect to your position on performance.
the financials have to make sense too. I mean, one of the reasons these projects make sense in terms of affordability is some of the tax credits, some things that are out there now. I mean, those things go away, it just makes that much more difficult. The market could change on you too, so.
Well, and you have a very attractive resource that's load following, and utilities are more and more risk averse now and more interested in a load following nature of the wind here. So it's good timing for your area.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, I'm excited.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Very informative.
Yep. All right. Item number 8, consideration and action to declare the 2 gantry cranes and track systems in shed 15E as surplus to the district's needs and to authorize their disposition by sale.
I'm laughing at this.
In shed 15 East, we do have 2 gantry cranes that were installed back in, I believe, 2002. We moved up that warehouse, and we have actually never used them.
Do they have all the packing material around them?
No. Fortunately,
We have received a request, it seems to be a very serious request, from an individual, well, it's a company that would like to purchase those from us. So we, in processing this, before we start discussing the sale of them, we need to have the board's approval to go ahead and declare them surplus to our needs. And as in 7 years we've never used them, we think they're surplus to our needs. We can then begin to offer them as a surplus item. The plan is to go ahead and take bids, sealed bids for them.
Brand new.
Is it just out of curiosity, is it a company within the port, or is it?
No, it's not.
No, if you recall, we did have a company in the port at one time interested, but that went nowhere. So we got a new request from a company outside of the port that was aware of them and is interested. So if we want to actually get serious about it, we need to take this step. And, we might as well.
I agree.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
We got a motion by Commissioner Lopez.
I'd like to second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Cowan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries.
And just a little further on that, the price on these is in excess of $300,000 when we put them in. We've been running them along as far as the depreciation with the 50-year warehouse. We would probably apply more of a 10 to 12-year depreciation to get about $157,000 book value on these. We'll put them on an equipment to get a minimum bid out there of about $157,000. Joe and I have been looking on the websites, and that's about what these things are running for.
These are brand new, so somebody's got to get them.
That would be
The only
deal.
thing to keep in mind is that that's true, but, I'm sure there's the cost of removal and transport and all that.
Absolutely.
I mean, in the end, if we don't like the price, we don't have to sell it.
And it comes back to you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're not gonna,
But we're not using them, so I think we should take that money and go put it to use.
well, don't
somewhere
disagree,
else.
but don't intend to sell them for, first guy comes along and wants to lose $500 for them either.
No, that's,
We need to offer them to the people from Monterey also, because they might be interested.
Well, if you have names, please let me know.
Yeah, because we will do it on a sealed bid basis. I mean, that's the intent, is that way it's not like, well, just negotiate with one individual who's indicated interest. They're gonna have to compete with everyone else. And hopefully we get a good response and get a favorable rate that we feel we can accept.
Is there any way that you guys can make a disc of pictures?
We probably could. We
That would
probably
be a
could.
good deal to do.
All right, let's move on
And
to
also
next.
check locally here again, see if that interest that was there once is still there.
Just out of curiosity, assuming somebody's a successful bidder, I mean, there's a lot of equipment, potential, a lot of damage that can happen to our warehouse out there. We need to be aware of, that
Liability.
we protect ourselves in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Okay. Item number 9, consideration and action to declare a list of vehicles, equipment, and other material as surplus to the district's needs and to authorize their disposition by the salvage auction team.
We provided you with a packet of the assets that we have that are ready to go for disposal. There's provision in our surplus, even though these actually have book values of 0. They weren't one-time assets on our account, so we need to get your permission to go ahead and dispose of them. There's also quite a bit of other equipment and surplus that we collected off of lease sites that will be taken at the same time.
When would you be proposing to have this sale?
We will probably advertise, I don't think we can have this ready for you on the 23rd. The first week in October, we'll have bids back to you. We should. The first board meeting.
Yeah, but when do we plan to get the information out
When
to
the
the
bids
people
go
that
out, I mean, I may want to
Oh,
tell
okay.
somebody, hey, they're going to sell this stuff.
I
We'll
think
bid on
that
it.
Veronica and Margie have this substantially ready to go, so I would think in the next 2 weeks we'll have them advertised.
And we'll distribute that to everybody on our local email, tenants, everyone, and whoever else we can get, so.
We're going to need to replace any of this equipment next year?
Most of this has been sitting for a while.
This
So
is stuff that we
not-
can replace.
Okay. that's
We've
what I
already
mentioned.
replaced much of it.
You know, for example, the excavator wasn't working, we bought a new excavator last year. The compactor, we bought a new compactor. Dump truck, we bought a new dump truck, so, I mean, this was stuff
Water
that,
truck,
you know, we keep it any longer, we're gonna have to archive it as a historical relic, so.
Most
we
of
need
this
to get rid of
equipment
it.
is not functioning at
A
all.
roller. All right.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion by Commissioner Lopez, seconded by Commissioner Reed.
Yes, sir.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries. Item number 10, consideration action to award the bid for the district's property and liability insurance program.
Okay, every 3 years, we go out and take bids on this program. This year, we got 2 bids. I think we sent out 9 packets. Our current bidders, our current carriers bid the same coverages that they have had, with the addition of TML bidding also on the general liability, but not the excess. I mean, they were reviewed by Carol Miller of RWL, who is our insurance consultant. She assisted in getting the bid packet together. And her recommendation is that we place the insurance as it's in the backup, essentially back to our current carriers. The one thing that's a little bit not to the lowest bidder is the liability coverage. The general liability that was bid by Aon also includes a requirement that the excess liability on Aon is a required addition to the general liability. So if we want to get the excess liability, we have to take the general liability from Aon. We're going to a little bit higher on that proposal, but that is a condition of getting that load back.
So are we talking about getting it from 2 different,
No.
can we go to TML?
TML, for the bulk of our insurance program, with the liability, the general and the excess coming from Aon.
Okay. I was a little confused. I read your letter. I was a little bit
sorry.
confused
That's true.
because I didn't know if we were buying, because the recommendation was to buy all of it from TML, so I didn't know, I couldn't understand. Okay, now I got it.
On the employee dishonesty crime, are we increasing that from 500,000 to $1 million?
Her recommendation is for the premium, it's $341, go up from 500,000 to $1 million, and she said that's a good bet.
And just out of curiosity, why do we need, I mean, it's not much money, and I'm okay with it,
That's our
but
bonding. Instead of, for myself, having to go and get a bond and all the girls in my office, going and getting individual bonds, this covers us in
Okay.
case somebody takes off with money. It's an insurance policy rather than a bond.
thank you, Debbie.
As a whole, if you really look at it, we would be expanding coverage, keeping the same, getting the umbrella coverage and all that, and the premium for the program this year is going to be about $19,000 less than the premium last year.
Mr. Chairman, will you entertain a motion that we...
I will. Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Arambula. All those in favor? Item carries. Item number 11, consideration and action to amend the interlocal agreement with TxDOT governing the overweight oversized permit program and to adopt a resolution certifying that fact.
At long last, we have worked out all of our issues with TxDOT, and this agreement is ready for your consideration and approval.
If you recall, we had held out on this pending the legislative action on the overweight corridor, so now that's done. They took care of our issues. Maybe not to our 100% liking, but certainly we can live with it.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we got a motion by Commissioner Aramula, seconded by Commissioner Lopez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries. Item 12, consideration and action for a memorandum of understanding with the U.S. Department of Transportation, Maritime Administration, and to designate a staff representative.
You recall, we've had discussions about this. When we were at the AAPA conference last year, one of the things we learned about is how the Port of Anchorage had entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Maritime Administration. And essentially, the way we view this is that it's an opportunity to create a relationship with a federal agency inside the Department of Transportation that we perceive in the future is going to become the port advocate agencies for port and port issues. And so we thought this would be an opportunity for us as we begin to look at ways of expanding our infrastructure to have an advocate within the administration or within certainly the federal government when there are issues associated with some of our improvement projects. So throughout some process, Mr. DeLay has been meeting with the folks at MARAD. We've met with them on 2 or 3 occasions and essentially drafted a memorandum of understanding similar to the one that is currently in place between the Port of Anchorage and MARAD, as well as the ports of Hawaii and the port of Guam. So kind of interesting that this process really hasn't caught on, but we certainly believe that this will be a benefit. It's something that we can use if it's to our advantage and we choose to. We could enter into a relationship with MARAD where they can effect function as a project manager for us with any federal funding on any federal projects associated with infrastructure at the port. With some of the things that we talked about earlier this evening, I think that moving forward in the future and hopefully expanding the role of MARAD to be more of a port advocate within Department of Transportation, may be very useful to us to have that relationship with MARAD.
Well, I think that's an excellent idea.
Absolutely.
Mr. DeLay can add to that with some of his discussions and how we got to this point.
Chairman, Commissioners, I'd just like to make some comments as to the purpose of this agreement and one other port that is a part of this is the Port of New Orleans. Is probably the largest port that has become part of this. I have spoken directly to the director of the Port of New Orleans and the Port of Anchorage, both of which are very happy with the relationship. It's basically an owner representation agreement, and it really doesn't bind the Port of Brownsville to anything until it's written very broad, until there is a project and or funding that is that you wish to bring them in as your owner representative. They have existing contract shops, they have existing accounting shops, they have existing program management offices. They can act in different capacities, whether it's a program manager, project manager, depending upon what your project is. At the Port of Anchorage, they're actually supervising a complete port, doubling the space of the entire port. Actually, so it's a very large project they're involved in, and coincidentally, they received all federal money to get this project done. MARAD, which is Maritime Administration, as you well know, is a division of the U.S. Department of Transportation. They will have someone sitting at the table on the Tiger grants. It is important that we enter into this. The timing couldn't be better. In fact, I've been instructed to hand deliver, if you so choose, to authorize the director to sign this contract to hand deliver it tomorrow so that it's in before the deadline of the Tiger applications. And so it, again, it is not a contract that binds you at this particular time to any commitments whatsoever. In fact, prior to this agreement being activated, there will have to be legislative language that authorizes MARAD to enter into such an agreement. We have language currently existing in 2 different pieces of legislation that we anticipate one of which, and/or both, will, one is the defense bill, appropriations bill, and the other is the energy bill, both of which has very good following and is not any language that is consequential to anyone. And we anticipate that that'll be done within 60, 90 days, which puts us, and again, in a time frame that would be advantageous to the possibility of furthering this agreement with any Tiger funds or other stimulus monies. I have numerous other reasons why, but I'll just answer a question rather than go into detail.
Any further discussion, questions?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I've been part of the ongoing discussion of this and watching it happen and come to life, and I'd like to make the motion that we do so.
Okay.
And that would include designating...
Yeah, authorizing me to execute.
Designating Eddie,
Port director.
Port director, to be the representative.
Okay, that would be
Seconded.
a motion by Commissioner Cowan, seconded by Commissioner Arambla. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item carries. Item 13, adjourn into executive session. It is 7:35 p.m. We're hereby adjourned into executive session.
Eddie.